Some great vision there in racing. The sport of kings. Jim Bowler is the man who's under the spotlight today. He is the VRC handicapper, the man who must assess 431 horses and come up with a weight. Well, Jim's come in this morning to give us, hot off the press, the top weights and the other weights of the principal chances. Keith Hillier's with Jim in the studio, and Max Presnell is in Sydney to discuss it. Jim, welcome once again. It's sort of the annual trip, isn't it, into the studios?
Except for Barcelona last year, yes.
Exactly. How was it this year for you?
Very strong, Bruce. Very good. First time ever we've had 4 equal top weights in a Melbourne Cup, and I think they're well supported by a very, very strong contingent of rising 4-year-olds.
Well, let's take a look at the top weights. As you said, we've got 4 right at the top, and they include Naturalism, Viander Cross, and also Drum Taps, the outstanding British horse, and
last year's winner Sub-Zero
and Sub-Zero, all with 58.5.
That's right.
Were you tempted to give one horse above the others? Was there one?
Well, you often, yes, you play with that in the mind, Bruce. I spoke to Jeffrey Gibbs in London about Drum Taps, and we came up with a rating with him in respect to the international horses such as Landowner we've seen racing here already. Then, when it came to the Australian contingent, I couldn't honestly weight Viander Cross or Naturalism above Sub-Zero, last year's winner. Sub-Zero defeated Viander Cross last year with exactly the same weight. So, and having respect that Sub-Zero has won an Adelaide Cup, a Melbourne Cup and been placed in a Sydney Cup, I couldn't put Naturalism and Viander Cross above them.
Drum Taps must have been a very difficult horse to weight, Jim. Some say he might be the best 2-miler in the world. He's won the Ascot Gold Cup for the past 2 years.
That's right.
But he's 8 years old.
That's exactly
Only
right.
2 8-year-olds have won the Melbourne Cup, 1938, I think.
That's right. You've got to take those figures into account. And again, I left the majority of that work to Jeffrey because he's seen these horses race overseas. I don't think it's largely in his park to put the weights beside them, or the relativity, and for me to assess them against Australian horses.
Let's look at last year's Melbourne Cup, because 3 of the horses were very strongly in contention. Sub-Zero, Viander Cross, Castletown.
That's right.
Your assessment of this race, Jim? I'm remembering it was on a track that wasn't suitable, really, except for the winner, I guess, in the second horse.
It didn't stop Think Big, did it, Bruce? When he came back, and that's what Sub-Zero's got. He's got Think Big's weight for his.
You don't think Sub-Zero wins that cup because it was a wet track, a heavy track, Jim? I
said the same with Gurner's Lane, Keith, when he won a Caulfield Cup. Who's to say that it won't be wet in November again? I think a handicapper's job is to take the result per se, and then apply the improvement for the first 3.
Keith, you spoke to Lee Friedman. What was his reaction to Sub-Zero, Naturalism, and his other horses?
Well, he expected somewhere similar to that for Sub-Zero. He said that if he has his way, Naturalism won't run in the Cup, Bruce. He'll be reserved for other races. An interesting runner that he does have is Runyon, an imported horse that won the Irish Derby trial, and it's bound for both Cups, the Caulfield and the Melbourne Cup.
Max, I haven't forgotten you. You're coming in very quickly, but we want to have a look at Our Pompey in the Adelaide Cup. He'd won the Derby, and Max, I was there this day, and he looked outstanding in winning the Adelaide Cup, and Jim, your assessment of this horse was 54.5?
Exactly the same as Sub-Zero last year, Bruce. It's a carbon copy of the Adelaide Derby, Adelaide Cup, and you've got to take it respect because of what Sub-Zero did in Flemington in November.
Well, I can tell you, Jim, that you won't get an argument from George. You gave this horse, Our Pompey, what George expected.
That's good.
He said, Bruce, that he doesn't know whether the horse is well weighted until he spends a couple of days poring over the weights to compare them to some of his rivals. Max,
how strong did you think the AJC Derby was this year, with Innocent King getting up on the fence to win?
I thought it was a reasonably strong race. It's more important, how strong did Jim Bowler think it was? Jim Bowler has given Our Pompey 54.5. Now, Air Seattle, every time he's raced Our Pompey's finished in front of him. I know one bloke, Clary Connors, is very confident that he can beat Our Pompey with Air Seattle, and particularly now, I think that Our Pompey's got to give Air Seattle 1.5 kilos. But Jim, how did you rate the AJC Derby?
I thought it was a very strong derby, Max, because of the interference suffered to Innocent King on the turn. To be able to pick himself up and still finish with that strength at the end of the race. And you've got to use, of course, captive addition, because there's a horse over in New Zealand called the Phantom Chance, who's had 10 starts for 8 wins and 2 placings, and there was only a hair's breadth between those two in the derby at Ellerslie. So really, captive addition is the measuring stick for both Innocent King and the Phantom Chance.
Is it your opinion that Innocent King's performance in winning the AJC Derby was the most outstanding staying performance
No, I
of the
said
year?
arguably it was one of the performances of the year, and certainly when you see the tape, every time you see the tape, you just can't help but be impressed by him.
What about our Tristolite, winning 2 Oaks in Adelaide, Australasian, the one we're about to look at, and then the South Australian. Max, did you get a chance to talk to Bart Cummings about her weight? She's got 50.
Yes, I caught Bart just before he was going to church. I would say after hearing about the 50 that the plate will be top-heavy with his donation for Jim Bowler's most Christian act. No, Bart is delighted with the weights of his horses, our Tristolite in particular. In fact, he said he's going to go to the VRC to see if he can get Jim more money.
Well, Jim's licking his lips down here about that. These are the top weights: Sub-Zero, Naturalism, Vianda Cross, Drum Taps, then Shaftesbury Avenue, Castletown. Bless his heart, Rough Habit, I love him. Star of the Realm, Tiago, Nick and Mannerism.
As we look at those top weights, Sub-Zero, Naturalism, Vianda Cross and Drum Taps, remember that the last top weight to win a Melbourne Cup was Comic Court in 1950. Before that, Peter Pan in 34 and Farlap in 30. So they've got a long road ahead, haven't they?
Gee, Jim, you've set them a task. Now, some of the more interesting runners, we've discussed a few of these already, but, Jim, a lot of these are rising 4-year-olds, and in fact, they all are. Your assessment of the respective derbies and Oaks around Australia as we look at these from the Phantom Chance down to our Tristolite?
Well, I think it was very strong this year, Bruce, simply because that the young horses went on to win open age races. We had Field Officer winning the Perth Cup, our Pompeii we've spoken about already, Captive Edition in the BMW, and the Phantom Chance defeated the older horses in a Group 1 2,000 metre weight for age race in New Zealand. And that's where the strength lies. Once they can do it as juveniles, as we saw with Sub-Zero last year, there's nothing to say they won't go on in our Spring Carnival as 5-year-olds.
Anyone really bluing? Sorry, Jim, anyone really bluing, Keith or Max? You've spoken to a lot of trainers.
Yes, they're not bluing from the ones that I've spoken to. The connections of Tennessee Jack rang this studio this morning and said, what weight did the Melbourne Cup winner get? I don't know whether that's confidence or not. Tennessee Jack, a hard horse to handicap because he was going to be favourite last year until he went wrong.
We sit here in June and July, Keith, and we talk about the obvious horses. When you're poring over the weights, it is the horses that are down at about 53 and below, down to about 50, that have done as much as they've been asked to do, up until as far as they've been tested in terms of distance. And certainly Tennessee Jack fits into that category as well, as does a half a dozen New Zealanders. 52 and a half.
52 and a half.
And we look at the market, it's very early. This market before the weights, we got this yesterday, but our Pompeii favourite at 12, Tennessee Jack is at 25 to 1. Max, we are running out of time. Give us a tip, Max, at this stage.
Oh, Jim has certainly made a mistake with Slight Chance, 50.5, I believe. So much so that I think Bob Thompson asked me to get his address so I can send him a case of Bollinger. 6 Group 1s, 50.5. Jim, you must think the filly's lost a leg.
No, Max, I was very conscious of the fact that in the spring, yes, Slight Chance had the wood on Mahia, but I thought Mahia turned it around in the autumn.
Jim, thank you very much. Keith, you got one tip?
No, just a word of warning. John Maher said this morning that, unlike last year, if it is heavy on Melbourne Cup Day, Star of the Realm won't run.
Well, here's my tip. It won't be heavy, it'll be dry, he'll win the Cup. Jim, thanks for coming in.
Thanks very much,
Catch
Bruce.
you next year.
Thanks, Keith.
A break, athletics after this.